Right. Well, guys, I appreciate everybody joining in. And looks like we have 21 people here already. So thanks for showing up on time and being prepared. That's awesome. We'll give everybody, everyone who's maybe just a couple minutes or a couple seconds late, just a few seconds. But while we're waiting, feel free to type in your name, where you're from, what's your role, and Ryan Ott, appreciate it, President, Groundwork Consulting. Where you guys from, Ryan? Reading, PA. All right, that's up. That's not too far from you, right, Danielle?
No, we work with Ryan. He's one of our strategic partners. So I'm happy to have him on the call. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. Perfect. Teresa, thanks for joining in. Nikki, good to see you. Utah, right. New York, PA, Wyoming. Well, we got them all over the place. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
Texas. Well, we haven't had a duplicate yet. Virginia.
Virginia.
All right. Well, we'll let people kind of join in, but we'll kind of get going here. So appreciate everybody joining in. Right. This is today's webinar is focused around hiring for grit. Right. So how to find and keep reliable people in a tough labor market. And my name's Kevin. And through our session, I'll be kind of guiding us. But Danielle's really the star of the show, Paragon HR. I'm happy to have you here, Danielle. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm sure we're all excited to learn a little bit more. So before we go into like formal introductions, do a little bit of house rules. Um, and so, with today's webinar, it's going to be kind of a fireside chat. So I'll just be kind of interviewing Danielle. If you have any questions, please post them. We'll answer them at the end there. We'll also be recording this, of course. So if you got to drop off early, we'll send you the recording, and then as if you can't stay on, as a little incentive, we got some special goodies we'll be giving away at the end there. So we'll go ahead and get into the actual introductions, right? So Danielle, she's our expert, but I'll let her introduce herself.
So my name is Danielle Stewart, and I started Paragon Consulting back in 2007. And the premise of my business was really to develop a solution for small to mid-sized businesses because I realized that there really wasn't a lot of support out there for small to mid-sized businesses when it came to HR support. And as probably many of you have experienced, HR is really important regardless of how big you are. So what our business does is it really right sizes HR from an accessibility standpoint. We work directly with our clients one-on-one. You always have someone to call, text, that type of thing, and also aligning with their budgets. So, that is really kind of about what we're about is supporting, the comprehensive HR needs of small to mid-sized businesses. And we've developed into niche markets such as the trades, which is why I'm here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Danielle. And
Yeah.
my name's Kevin. I'm a partner channel sales manager here at ClockShark. So working with Danielle, she kind of reached out, thought it aligned perfectly. As ClockShark, we work with the small and mid-sized businesses as well, specifically around timekeeping, which is a little bit of part of HR. But
Definitely.
we definitely run into clients all the time with some of the stuff that we're going to be, talking about here today, hiring for grit, like how to keep people. Um, and we hear it even just from our clients, right, with time tracking. So thought it was very relevant. So we'll kind of dive into it here. And I appreciate you kind of introducing yourself there, Danielle. And me personally, because I'm not an HR expert, I'm looking forward to learning some more as well here, just for our clients and our general audience. So I guess we'll jump right into it, right? So
Sure.
big picture, right? Why is it hard to find good people who actually stick around in today's labor market?
Well, and why it's so hard right now is because the culture has shifted in terms of what people really see as important. People have the talent pool hasn't vanished. It's just gotten more competitive because people have more options. And so, it's almost like a prerequisite where you've got to align your rates. You've got to make sure that your benefits are meeting that baseline. But what it really comes down to now is culture. People want to enjoy their work. People want to feel valued. They want to feel appreciated. And so what happens is, it's less about, finding the person that's just going to stay with you forever. The important piece of that is really looking at your environment and looking at your culture.
Okay. All right. That makes perfect sense. And, it's maybe not always about the paycheck, right? So that
Right.
makes sense. And when we talk about like what makes a good hire in the trade, like what does that look like as well? Like how do these guys know what a good hire is going to be?
Well, and that's shifted too, because it used to be a situation where you could post a job and you'd have your pick of applicants, and you tend to just kind of align with who is the most skilled. But when you're looking at culture, and culture is really the vibe of your organization, what it feels like to actually work in your business. And when it comes to really kind of identifying the right person, we want to make sure they have that baseline skill set, but you want to shift your mentality to look at hiring the right person for your business. They have the right personality. I know we called this hiring for grit, but it's almost like hiring for character. You really want to know who they are as a person, how they're going to potentially manage conflict, how they're going to be with customers, how they approach, accountability. All of those factors really play in to how well they're going to perform for you, how well they're going to integrate into the team, how well they're going to take care of your customers. So, some of the giveaways that we have for the end is a lot of what I'm talking about here today. I kind of put together as a playbook that is going to help you identify these things during the interview process. So it can be tough because it is a gamble. It's still a gamble. There's never a silver bullet to walk into an interview and then be able to, and it's happened to me. I do HR, and I've had situations where I've taken a chance on someone that interviewed perfectly and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
So I think kind of like approaching it from that standpoint too, and just accepting that there are some that are going to get by you. And through that experience, you learn. You learn what to look for. You learn, you're never going to make the same mistake twice. So it's important not to get too hard on yourself, when you have a hire that interviewed really well and didn't work out. But really shifting your mindset away from, I have to get the best skilled person for the position. Yes, you want the best skilled, but do they have the intangibles like that I just talked about? Because when it comes to training for the intangibles, that is really difficult to do. So to retrain someone, to upskill somebody on some of their more technical skills is way easier than teaching someone how to be accountable, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Like teaching somebody how to do a correct weld, right, with a bead is going to be much easier than teaching them how to be on time. Right.
Absolutely, absolutely. Or how they engage with customers, or how they,
Right.
if they do mess something up, how they handle it, because
Right.
how they handle it and how your supervisors handle it, well, that's your culture.
Yeah.
That's how it feels to be in your workplace. So that's why, going back to the beginning part of it, it's really about, as an owner or leader within the business, looking at what is it like on a day-to-day basis, just kind of having a good pulse on what your environment is like. I know I mentioned having leaders, modeling the behavior that you want. And it doesn't mean that you have to give up, having a nice casual work environment, but maybe you have some non-negotiables where you have a hard line about favoritism, or there's no yelling. Like, we can joke, we can have a good time, but you have some non-negotiables, and that way it just establishes some just really good baseline for your culture and for your environment.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that's really important, right? Because that is going to help with retention, of course, right? If you got a group of
Oh, yeah.
people that are all
Mhm.
like-minded and work the same, work well together. But what happens, like, what's the impact if we do end up hiring somebody who's maybe not a good fit?
It can be pretty detrimental, and it typically hits you on three fronts. Usually revenue. So when you look at how much it costs to hire someone, how much your time it takes up, how much of your lead time in terms of training these people, onboarding, all of those things, have a cost associated with them. But the other piece of that too is rework. So if you have a situation where you have a new hire that might have skill issues, rework is a big deal too. So it hits you on the revenue side. The other thing is that if you have people that are customer facing, well, if you make a poor hire and they may not have good customer service skills, good conflict resolution skills, they get really defensive, they have a hard time dealing with difficult customers, it could hit you from a brand standpoint too, which you absolutely don't want. And then the third place that it can hit you is internally. So someone who, again, has a hard time dealing with conflict, has a hard time with accountability, those types of things, reliability, punctuality, that's going to be a strain on your team. That's going to be a strain on your internal environment. So that's why it's important to really, when you have new hires start, really have a pulse on how they're integrating, how, getting feedback from the people that are working with them, getting feedback from them. And so there are a lot of ways that you can kind of tap in those first 30 to 60 to 90 days to see how are they integrating? Is this going to be a good fit? Because if you determine that someone isn't going to be a good fit, you really suffer in those three areas the longer you hold on to them. So that's why, you want to take your time with hiring, but when it comes to terminating someone that is not meeting those areas or is struggling in the areas that I just mentioned, you don't want to spend a lot of time making a decision because of the impact that it can have.
Sure. That makes sense. All right. So and you mentioned it too, like, so when you're hiring, and I don't want to give away your playbook, of course, but what are some tidbits? Like, what are some examples or some tips and tricks to where we would be able to kind of, through that hiring process, figure out like, hey, is this guy going to be a good fit? Are they going to show up on time? Do they have a good culture fit? Like, what are just a couple of things there without giving away your whole playbook?
So figure out your non-negotiables. If punctuality is really important, if accountability is really important. So again, looking at your environment, figuring out what your non-negotiables are, and then developing behavioral-based interview questions when you're interviewing. So tell me about a time that you managed a conflict with a customer and how you handled it. And so really, and in that playbook, I have a bunch of those types of questions, and I kind of guide you in how to develop those questions that are specific for you. The other area, so again, asking questions where they have to reflect back on a time where they demonstrated the skill that you're looking for is really, really helpful. The other piece of that is taking a look at how they engage during the interview process. Are they quick to respond? Were they punctual in terms of the interview? Another trick can be, setting the interview up quickly to see if they're able to kind of shift or how they communicate through that process. Another thing that some of our clients like to do is have part of the interview process potentially be like a little bit of job shadowing and on the job training type of thing, where they might come in, get to kind of see how a certain thing works. Maybe we get to see how they can demonstrate some of their skills, but then your people can have some feedback and integrate with them. And we just get a little bit more of a sense of who they are. Because like I said before, we really want to figure out who they are, how they solve problems, how they show up. And it's hard to do that in, like a 30-minute interview. So kind of looking at these different aspects of the process can really help with that too.
Again, I think those are really good tips. Like, I never even thought about that. Like setting up the interview quickly, seeing how well they respond,
Mhm.
communicate to it. Are they able to shift? That shows
Yep.
adaptability, right? And also kind of maybe a drive, right? Like, hey, how bad do they really want this? Because if it's not that
Oh yeah.
important, they might blow
Yeah.
it off, right?
Oh
Uh,
yeah. I had a situation where I had a client and they had they had a candidate that no showed to the interview. And they were like, look, I'm desperate to fill this role. The candidate contacted us back and was like, oh, I want to get back on the schedule. I had an issue come up, whatever. But they no call and no show. And so we said to the client, we really don't recommend moving forward because they're demonstrating a behavior that you might not want to deal with. Well, the client, again, out of desperation, was like, look, we don't have anyone for the role. Let's interview them. So they
sure.
showed up to their next interview late. Ultimately, the client ended up hiring them again against our advice, and shortly thereafter had to fire them for attendance related issues.
Yeah.
So that's where, again, just kind of you can feel that tension of like, oh my gosh, I have to fill this role. But so it's really important just to remember, if this person doesn't work out, is it really going to be worth the time that I'm saving by filling the role? So really kind of thinking through it from that perspective, because it's going to help you make decisions from just a more foundational, better place than out of that desperation.
Yeah, right. It's a need over a want, right? Or I guess a
Yeah,
necessity, right? Like what's the ROI on that? Like kind of going back to what you said on the three different
yeah,
things that it can hit you. So yeah,
yep,
maybe taking some time. Those are great tips. So thank you for sharing
yeah,
that. And those are definitely some early warning signs, right? So setting clear
yep,
expectations, right? Finding like what you said, your non-negotiables are super important.
yep.
Um, so what's the best way to do that, right? Like, how do you find those non-negotiables in your culture?
So you find those non-negotiables based on how your workplace functions best. So I know, like when I look at my own team, where we're kind of spread out in terms of being in different locations, that type of thing. But I look at like my clients' needs as well, and accessibility is really important. So when I look at like bringing people onto my own team, I look at reliability. Are they going to be responsive? How they approach things, that type of thing. So you really kind of look at your own organization and you see it from the perspective of, how does this function as smooth as possible, and what type of personalities work best in that? So, and oftentimes it's looking at your best people, because we look at our best people and we're like, can I just copy and paste this person and then everything will be fine? So it's looking at those non-negotiables, and then you can really make that your mission statement, or your goals as far as what the behavioral expectations are. So, we're all about customer service because we're building our brand. Attendance and punctuality is really important because of the type of business that we are. And then so from there, you then build out questions that will help you determine, is this person going to be aligned with that or not? The other thing that you can do too, and this is no matter how big or small you are, is I would definitely recommend having a probationary or introductory period. If you don't want to sound, probationary can kind of sometimes seem like intense, but introductory evaluation period. So maybe you give like a 60 or 90-day review. And through that, you benchmark them against what your non-negotiables are and see how well they're doing. Because that little check-in can really help, because again, especially with small to mid-sized businesses, we're all pulled in different directions. And you could potentially have a situation where a new hire might be where, between 1 and 10, they might be operating at a 4. But if we don't check in, we might not realize that way down the road where things get more complicated, that type of thing. So another really good tip is just having a simple introductory period review, so that you can say, all right, how is this person leveling up? Is this going to work or not? And then that kind of gets you into that place where you're able to take advantage of making whatever moves that you need to make.
Yeah, I think those are all really good tips and makes perfect sense, right? Setting yourself up for success, with your
Mhm.
workforce. Now, the other side of that, right, is okay. Yeah, we're given tips on how to find good labor. How do we keep that good labor, right? Because today's market, or maybe it's not so bad, but I remember a couple years ago, COVID, everybody was switching here and there and different getting
Mhm.
pays, and right. So
Right.
with the landscape it is today, how do we keep that good labor?
Well, the cool thing is it's really simple. It's culture. It's the same thing as, attracting them. So when it comes to keeping them, you really want to, as a leader, think through and get a good handle on what it feels like to work in your organization. So are we streamlined when it comes to our processes and procedures? Does everyone have access to the tools that they need to successfully do their jobs? How do our leads lead? How are the relationships between staff? Because the thing is that if your pay and benefits and those things are aligned with the marketplace, but you have a really good culture, most employees aren't going to want to test the boundaries because that culture is a competitive advantage. There are a lot of dysfunctional workplaces out there. And so an employee who feels really good about the people they work with, they enjoy their customers, they feel prepared on the job, they enjoy, again, the overall dynamic, they feel valued and appreciated, they're not going to want to risk potentially going into a position or a company where they don't have that anymore, because that's their day-to-day life. That's really their experience. And another way that I kind of help leaders think through this is sometimes, like, have you ever had a job that you hated?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And but part of you were like, well, I had grit and I worked through it, and that's just kind of how it was back then, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
it's a little bit, so when you have that mindset, sometimes you can look at a work environment and be like, well, a tougher environment, it just is what it is. So I say, is it a place that you would want your kid to work? That's another good way to be like, would I want my kid to work there? Because it is about making it a place that your people enjoy. And the cool part is that when you make it a place that your people enjoy working there, you're going to enjoy leading it more. You're going to enjoy your company more. You're going to have less issues. Things are going to flow. Like, you'll deal with challenges, but overall, everyone's going to be on the same page because we're all clear about what we're here to do, whether that is brand or customer service or whatever that competitive advantage is. So, when you look at investing more time and thought into your culture, just remember, it's not just about benefiting them and their experience. It's going to make your life easier too.
That makes perfect sense. And to kind of tie this back to ClockShark too, because I think this is a good kind of tie-in.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
so culture's huge. What about the systems you have in place too, right? Like, time tracking is just one piece of that, of course, but
Mhm.
how does that tie in with that culture?
So that ties in, and especially with younger generations too. So as you're hiring younger generations, they're used to technology. I have a 5 and a 6-year-old, and they know more functionality on my iPad than I do. I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
can you do this for me? So, what those generations look for is ease of processes, streamline things that make their lives easier. And the nice thing is that when you look at that, and especially with what you guys offer, the less time they get tied up in paperwork and manual processes, the more time they can dedicate to the services and all of the things that actually move the needle forward on your business.
Yep. That makes and that's what we hear from our clients too, right? So,
Yeah.
like we get a lot of clients in that small business space that are coming, hey, my guys are complaining about the paper timesheets, having to turn them in, chase them down. We're always constantly
Yep.
hunting them down, right? That's kind of negative culture, right? We're always like
Yeah.
roadblocks, and so that's where we kind of step in. But we also talk to a lot of clients that don't have any HR support, right? So
Mhm.
they're wondering, they're like, I've gotten on sales calls before, and clients are asking me like HR questions that I have no idea how to answer. So this is all really helpful stuff that we're going over. What other tools, I guess, would be, other than time tracking, of course, right? Smoothing processes, time tracking is just a small piece of that. What other tools would you say are like the most important to make sure that you have out there to build your culture as best as possible?
Well, I think it's really individualized to your specific organization and what you're doing. But I think the best way to find out what might work best for your team is to engage them in the conversation. Talk to your leads about, what would make your life easier? Are there any processes that you would change? Because they're the ones out on the field, or they're the ones out in the shop, depending on how you're structured. So starting to open up the conversation about, how do we do work? How do our operations flow? Is there anything that we could do to make your life easier? If you were able to automate this, do you think that we could do more of this over here? And I think that that's an especially important exercise to go through if you're an organization that's looking to grow. Because if you're looking to grow, we really have to take a look at what's going on internally so that we can create bandwidth in order to do that.
Okay. Yeah, and with a lot of the smaller trades, right? It feels like, and I've gotten this, but it feels like, with guys out in the field, they can sometimes feel disconnected from the company
Mhm.
and that culture. So how do we make sure that everybody does feel like when we get a good hire and we're like, hey, this is a great fit for our culture, and maybe they're happy, but how do we keep everybody connected? Like, what's the best thing to do there?
Well, and again, this is an area where I can personally identify, even though we have an HR firm, I can personally identify with this because we have people spread out all across the state. And what we do and what I do as the leader is I really make an intentional effort to connect and to be involved. And what that might look like is we have a group chat, and on that group chat, we might share a win. We also are always accessible to each other to reach out to where when I have a new hire that comes in, I pair them with a mentor so that they have someone that they can reach out to and they have that connection. But if I ever learn and I am checking in often of a situation where I'm like, wow, they really did a great job with that, then I want to communicate that to the team. Or it could be as simple as a situation where we want to do an event or we want to get together and we kind of use the group chat. So finding different ways, and a group chat might not work, but just knowing that it's going to be important to think through communication touch points, knowing that isolation kills culture, connection is going to make it thrive. When someone feels like they're a part of it, and they don't necessarily need to be actually in the building, but it could be as simple as just a text to that person to say, hey, I just want to let you know, great job. If you need anything else, just let me know. That can go a long way. So it's important, again, as that leader to think through, all right, how does communication work now? Does everyone feel like they're connected? What are the different ways that we can be connected? At the beginning of the day, maybe we just do a huddle just so we're all aligned in terms of where everyone will be and we have a quick touch point. But it's important to also be really specific about the intent of those meetings because you don't want to just have meetings for nothing. I've gotten a ton of feedback from people when I do culture audits for them that are like, we have all these pointless meetings. So you want to make sure that if you do something like that, like we're going to have a 5-minute huddle at the beginning just to kind of kick things off, that you
Yeah.
stay really connected to what the purpose of that is. Because sometimes if we overdo it, it can kind of work against us as well.
Okay. Yeah, and that makes sense, right? We don't have too many pointless meetings at ClockShark, but I've been involved. So I'm like, hey, what are we doing here, right?
Well, yeah, yeah,
Like,
right,
hey, I could be
right,
doing something else. So that makes perfect
right.
sense. And so, what's one of the things that, in your experience, because you deal with this every single day, like, what's one thing that maybe is easy to overlook that owners, CFOs, whatever your role is, they may overlook that maybe drives people away?
I know that I sound like a broken record, but it is really that culture piece. Oftentimes we can think because it used to be like this, as long as I'm paying at a market level, I'm offering the right benefits and salary, or maybe I'm even paying a little bit more, that we're good. And unfortunately, it just doesn't work like that anymore. And so, I think the biggest takeaway here from an ownership perspective or a leadership perspective is to really get to know your culture and what it's like because how your employees feel about your business has a direct impact on retention. But the other thing that we didn't talk about is engagement. So you could have someone that you retain, but if they're not engaged, that's not going to be a productive worker for you. If you have someone though that's engaged and is real committed to your brand and pushing your business forward, that is like the dream employee. So I would say, the biggest takeaway from here is recognizing that it's not, when it comes to hiring a person, we're looking for character. We want a baseline skill. We're not in a position to take someone on and then we have to teach them from the ground up, depending on how you operate. But we're looking for character. But then we're also looking at our environment and our culture because we can get the character, but if we don't have the environment as well, it's going to be hard to keep that really good person.
Okay. Yeah. And with, engagement, right? We didn't really talk about it much. So,
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess, right? Hey, having a good culture helps somebody stay engaged, right? I get the
Mhm.
theme of this. Um, but what are some tips and tricks to help people stay engaged, other than just communication, right? Because that's important, of course. But that engagement, like how do these business owners make sure that that stays there?
Yeah. I mean, with engagement, finding out how it is during their workday. Is there anything that would make their job easier? What type of feedback do they have? Do they see anything? Get really looking at them from the standpoint of they have a view of your business that and a perspective that you don't have. And so it's important to value that and really kind of understand what it's like from their perspective. I mean, they might have some really good suggestions. So really kind of hearing people. The other piece of that too is giving them opportunities to grow. And now you might be in a situation where you're a smaller shop or you're a smaller organization. So this doesn't have to be like a crazy, development level type of thing. It could be a situation where you give people opportunities to get involved in bigger projects, or maybe you have a lead tech and you rotate that. You also look at people's salaries and maybe you make adjustments before they ask. So those are all types of things, because what those things are doing is you're demonstrating genuine interest in them. And when you demonstrate that genuine interest in them, they then are going to come back with engagement. They're going to be genuinely interested. And the cool part about that is that your engaged employees will help keep your culture clean. Meaning, when you have engaged employees, and let's say you deal with a little bit of gossip, or you might have a toxic personality, those engaged employees are going to help really dissolve that, work with that, let you know what's going on. So that's where they can engage. Employees are just so incredibly powerful because they can help you with your culture. And then you retain them. And also, from the standpoint of how they interact with your customers, how they represent your brand, it's just so powerful, so
Yeah.
incredibly powerful.
Yeah, internal champions, right? Is what
Yeah.
we're thinking about there.
Yeah. Yeah, and
All right.
it doesn't need to be anything crazy in terms of like, oh, well, I'm a smaller business, so I'm not in a position to, elevate people constantly or that type of thing. Just work with what you have and think through what you have, because the reality is that most times, like, your competitors probably aren't thinking about it this way. And
Right.
so when you can create an environment where the other thing is your engaged people talk, and they'll find other engaged people and
Yeah,
be like, hey, this is
absolutely.
how we do it over here. And then you can be in a position where people are naturally attracted to your culture. Then you're in a position where, like, you're not even like, oh, it's so hard to find people. You'll have people that, it's cool because we're in that position where all having, one of my employees will be like, hey, I heard this person's looking, here. They wanted to submit their resume over. That is so nice to have from an ownership perspective, because replacing people is super challenging. You might be in a smaller business where if you lose someone, you get sucked back into the day-to-day.
Yeah.
So that's where, again, all of what we're talking about is incredibly important, especially to your experience as a leader.
Yeah. And that all makes perfect sense. And of course, like, if there's anybody like our clients, for example, that maybe are new to this, right? Or are growing and not sure, that's why Paragon HR is here, right? To help
Yeah.
out with this, these tips and
Yep.
tricks. So, and we believe in that, at ClockShark as well, right? Hey, we don't have all the answers, but making work life easier, smarter, more efficient. Right? That's what a lot of our mission statement is about. So, Daniel, I
Yep.
appreciate all your insights here. They've been great. I know we're
Of
kind of at a
course.
time here for
Yeah.
questions, so we want to make sure we answer those. So if anybody, I'm going to open up the questions or take a look here. But if anybody else has some questions, feel free to post them now. Let's take a look and and see if we got any here that we're going to answer. Um, and Jen, in the background, I may be doing this wrong. I don't actually see any questions at this point either. Danielle absolutely killed it, which I think she did. Or I'm not looking at this correctly, as far as any questions, or we may not have any. But I'll give everybody just a couple seconds to maybe post any if you have any. Oh, okay, got it.
Awesome. Awesome. So if the information is validated, that you're going to retain or no. That's great. That's great. And oftentimes it can be really good just to get validation that you're on the right track, because again, it can be really limited in terms of the types of resources that are available. And so, yeah, I mean, knowing that that is something that you focus on, it's absolutely your competitive advantage. So keep it up for sure.
Yeah, and that's a great point too, Danielle, right? Like that's a wonderful competitive advantage, right? Like
Oh,
in our space, ClockShark, like time tracking, like you can't. I mean, it's clock in, clock out. Yeah, you could do some cool stuff with GPS and stuff, but you can't really differentiate yourself all that much. And what we do is really try to make sure we have good culture, of course, and talk
yeah.
about that all the time, but also with our customer service. Like that's what we hang our hat on. So
Mhm.
those little things as a company that you can do to differentiate yourself, like as a plumber, not that much, right? But from a hiring perspective, if you can have that culture that really differentiates you, and like you said, attracts people to your company. So I
Right.
think that's really powerful.
Well, and the other thing is that when you look at it from the customer service experience, most of you guys are dealing with like referral based, like referrals are a huge aspect of new business that's coming in. So again, when you have engaged employees and you have a culture, that's a situation where a customer has a great experience because of how the tech was when they showed up. And they're like, you know what, you have to call them. They are the ones that you want to work with.
Right.
And to develop that reputation, I just love the fact that it takes your time, but it's free. It's free to work on your culture. You don't need a huge budget. You just have to be willing to kind of look at the things that might need to change internally. You might have to make some difficult decisions if you have some toxic people on your staff, that type of thing. But yeah, I mean, the cool thing is it's so accessible to be able to make some tweaks internally and really experience the type of business that you want to run. Yeah, and that's a challenge. So in here it says it's difficult when the boss has a very different personality, being from a different country and not having the base of how to really deal with people. He does not understand how to provide positive feedback or engage others. And when it comes to dealing with that type of personality, my biggest recommendation is to really, when you look at the outcomes in terms of when we do give feedback and we do engage others, how that impacts the return on investment, how an engaged employee really is able to get you to your goals quicker than a compliant employee. And so, when I've worked with leaders that can be a little bit resistant to some of this stuff or just have a different way of handling it, I really like to show them the power of exercising emotional intelligence, because it's kind of what we're talking about here is emotional
Yeah.
intelligence. And how when you leverage that, you're able to get more out of them than by structure or force or discipline. Like you're so much more successful. So what I always like to do is with those types of leaders is just show them the bottom line, show them the numbers, show them the retention rates, show them the backup to show that if we approach it a little bit differently, we're going to get to the result you want. And then they tend to be a little bit more open to engaging in a different way. But yeah, that is a tough one. That is definitely a tough one.
Yeah, I can see where that would be tough. Looks like Megan's got something for us here. Typing away. But she already said it's been super helpful. Love to hear that. I was about to ask something similar. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's
Beautiful.
where, okay, so with that, I like when, and especially when you have to approach that, it can be very uncomfortable. So, you don't want to be like, hey, when you interact with this person, it like creates, X, Y, Z. So you almost focus it less on their behavior, less on that, and more on, what? When you look at culture, these are the things that are going to take us to that goal. And you get away from the personality, because what happens is when you try to just directly address the personality because it's the root of what's happening, they get defensive. And it doesn't get you to where you need to go. So where I've had the most success is when I point to, hey, this is the outcome that we want, and this is how we can get there. And then I've had those types of leaders kind of soften to that, and then kind of move towards that. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And the crazy thing, so it's very uncomfortable since he thinks it's always the employee and not him. And that's why I said that sometimes looking at your culture can be really hard as a leader because it requires self-awareness. And
Yeah.
self-awareness isn't always like an easy thing to say, like, oh, you know what, I've got to hold back on this reaction I'm having because I know it's going to impact this dynamic here. So it's working with emotional intelligence and self-awareness, which, again, is such an individualized thing.
Yeah, and that's something probably, right, Danielle, you can help with.
Oh,
Me,
yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure how to handle that situation.
Yeah.
So I'm glad
And
we have somebody like you who does.
yeah. And we have a lot of programs. One of the programs that we're just going to send some information out about is really our core program and how we support the trades. And it is a program where you have access to us throughout the entire year. We will support you with situations that come up, just similar to like, give you guidance. We'll also support you with your employee handbook and those types of things. For a very low annual fee because we recognize margins run thin on a lot of our trades clients. So we've developed
Yeah.
this program over the last few years where you'll have access to us to be able to bounce a lot of this stuff off of. Because again, it can be really helpful just to be connected to someone that can guide you through how to start working on your culture, especially if you haven't really thought about it this way before.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
These are all great questions and good interaction, guys. So we appreciate it. And if you want to learn more, right, we're going to send a follow-up email and scan the QR code here. If you're interested in learning how ClockShark can help with maybe some of your tools to help with that culture streamline, time tracking, payroll, make sure to contact us, start a free trial. And then of course for the HR support, which Danielle is an expert at. I think we all got that impression here today. I learned a lot. Hopefully you guys did as well. And we
Thank you.
appreciate you guys joining in. Danielle, any last words before we wrap this up?
I would just say culture is king. So when it comes to you want character in your hires, and for your own homework, it's all about maintaining your culture. So that's how I'll leave it.
All right, perfect. Well, thanks everybody for joining in today, and
Thank you.
keep a lookout for our next webinar.
Take care.
Take care, everybody.